The MAGA firewall fails in Indiana, a rare Republican rebellion. Some surprise good news here. Indiana Republicans in the state Senate have refused to bend to Trump's will and redraw the state's 7-2 congressional map into a 9-0 Republican map. The chamber, controlled by Republicans, I might add, voted against the measure 31-19, and that includes 21 Republicans who voted against the measure, making it a majority of the GOP caucus that said no. The move comes in the aftermath of a heavy pressure campaign by Trump, Vice President Vance, and Republican officials and groups, including the Heritage Foundation, which just today tweeted, "The Heritage Foundation, President Trump has made it clear to Indiana leaders if the Indiana Senate fails to pass the map, all federal funding will be stripped from the state, roads will not be paved, guard bases will close, major projects will stop. These are the stakes, and every no vote will be to blame." Imagine that, threatening to straight up stop serving their own constituents if they don't bend to the whims of a power-crazed autocrat. How's that for a billboard of what Republican governance gets you? It gets you more threats, more intimidation if you don't bestow total loyalty and total control onto them. Yeah, seems like a great platform as we head into 2026. In fact, basically every power player on the right weighed in here. Don Jr. wrote, "If Indiana Republicans side with these never-Trumpers to do the dirty work of Democrats, I'll be spending a lot of time in Indiana next year campaigning against every single one of them. P.S. These rhinos, consultants, sabotaging MAGA need to be rooted out of the GOP." J.D. Vance, who'd been dispatched to the state numerous times, wrote, "Rod Bray, the Senate leader in Indiana, has consistently told us he wouldn't fight redistricting while simultaneously whipping his members against it. That level of dishonesty cannot be rewarded, and the Indiana GOP needs to choose a side." Trump himself weighed in constantly, with the most recent being literally yesterday, writing in part, "Every other state has done redistricting willingly, openly, and easily. There was never a question in their mind that contributing to a win in the midterms for the Republicans was a great thing to do for our party and for America itself. In all fairness, the Democrats have been doing redistricting for years and continue to do so. Unfortunately, Indiana Senate leader Rod Bray enjoys being the only person in the United States of America who's against Republicans picking up extra seats. In Indiana's case, 2 of them. He is putting every ounce of his limited strength into asking his son to be very vulnerable friends to vote with him. By doing so, he's putting the majority in the House of Representatives, Washington, D.C., at risk, and at the same time putting anybody in Indiana who votes against this redistricting likewise at risk. The people of Indiana don't want the party of sleepy Joe Biden, Kamala, Ilhan Omar, or the rest to succeed in Washington. The current political climate and tactics of intimidation. In fact, speaking of Trump's pressure campaign, think about the tools that Donald Trump himself uses to get his way. The threat of violence, used it on January 6th, used it against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and now he's using it against Indiana Republicans. This is an excerpt from The Atlantic. In the hearing's closing moments, Senator Greg Walker, a Republican, described the harassment he received after declaring his early opposition to redistricting, including an unsolicited pizza delivery and a separate incident in which heavily armed police responded to a false emergency call to his home. He said he was fortunate because, unlike other Republicans subjected to such swatting attempts, he did not have small children who might have been traumatized by the scene. Quote, "I refuse to be intimidated," Walker said, reaffirming his intent to vote no. Through tears, he described having held a friend's newborn the night before and worrying about the world the child would inherit. Quote, "I fear for this institution," Walker said. "I fear for the state of Indiana, and I fear for all states if we allow threats and intimidation to become the norm." And so, it's no surprise that these people did not want to legitimize a system of intimidation that would only validate these very tactics again in the future. Perhaps they didn't want to offer positive reinforcement to a guy who only knows how to use fear and violence to get his way. Trump's rewriting of history. And yet, despite all of that work that Donald Trump did, the effort failed quite easily. At which point, Trump was asked about the failure and gave the single most telling answer he could have possibly given. Reporter: in Indiana, just a few moments ago, the Senate there rejected the congressional maps to redistrict in that state. A number of Republicans voted against that redistricting effort. You've spent a lot of time talking about this. The vice president traveled to Indiana. What's your reaction, Donald Trump? Well, we won every other state. That's the only state. It's funny because I won Indiana all 3 times by a landslide, and I wasn't working on it very hard. Would have been nice. I think we would have picked up 2 seats if we did that. You had one gentleman, the head of the Senate, I guess, Bray, whatever his name is. I heard he was against it. He'll probably lose his next primary whenever that is. I hope he does, but because he's done a tremendous disservice. I mean, think of it. It's a great place. I love the people there. They love me. You know, we won in a landslide all 3 times, got tremendous votes. I got record votes, and then there's no reason for doing that. And the Democrats do it to us. So I can't imagine that they do it. But I wasn't very much involved. But there's a man named Ray as I guess, head of the Senate. Was that Bray? Is that the name Bray? I mean, I'm sure that whatever his primary is, it's, I think, in 2 years. But I'm sure he'll go down. He'll go down. I'll certainly support anybody that wants to go against him. I wasn't very much involved, of course. Kind of like how Patrick Mahomes wasn't quite involved in last year's Super Bowl game since he lost. It is almost impressive the extent to which this guy is so narcissistic, so egocentric. He is physically incapable of taking responsibility for anything that doesn't reflect well on him. And of course, now that Trump has decided to rewrite history, his beautiful little foot soldiers are out here regurgitating the same talking points, and no one is a more loyal doormat than Mike Johnson. Reporter: are you worried about Trump's growth on power after Indiana? Do you think it shows he's a lame? Mike Johnson: not at all. Lame duck. He is not a lame duck. He's the most powerful president of this generation and many others. We have a lot more work to do together. The outcome in Indiana is inconsequential to that. We are going to win the campaign. No, he did not put a major pressure campaign for it. He let his opinion be known as he does on everything all the time, all day long. We win some, we lose some. It is no indication whatsoever about what's going to happen next year in the midterm elections. We are excited about that. We have a great campaign to run, and we go forward regardless of how each one of these states comes out. We're going to win on whatever maps are presented. So I'm very bullish. I'm more bullish today than I was yesterday, and you'll see that. And you guys underestimate us. The only thing more pathetic than Mike Johnson's obsequious civility to Trump is watching him play make-believe about Trump's waning influence. Someone should let him know that even though he lives deep inside of the confines of Trump's colon, he doesn't actually work for the guy, the ongoing redistricting wars, and the state of democracy. So here's where the redistricting wars stand right now. Texas added 5 seats for Republicans. North Carolina and Missouri both added a seat for Republicans. Ohio added 2. Meanwhile, California added 5 for Democrats. Virginia is on its way to adding 4 for Democrats. Utah's gerrymander was blocked in court, and that will be another seat for Democrats. And, of course, we're still waiting on Florida for Republicans and Maryland for Democrats. So it may already be a wash at this point. And remember, that is without thinking about how these gerrymanders may turn out to be. Dummy manders, if the GOP's districts were drawn too thin for Republicans, and a blue wave means that Democrats actually win more seats than the result of Republicans' efforts to redraw the maps for themselves. But I want to be absolutely clear about something here. Even if Democrats do overcome the odds and win out, that does not negate the damage that Donald Trump, Republicans, and the conservatives on the Supreme Court are doing by engaging in this race to the bottom to engineer themselves a permanent majority in the House. I think gerrymandering is a scourge, and I've always supported nationwide independent redistricting commissions. But the only thing worse than gerrymandering is watching Democrats unilaterally disarm. So my message to Democrats is this: we didn't start this map redrawing fight but we should absolutely be willing to end it by fighting back and sending a message to Republicans that if you want to try and undermine democracy, you do so at your own peril. The broader political context, issues dominating the national conversation. The Indiana vote, while geographically small, is a microcosm of the current national political situation, which is defined by two major interconnected conflicts.